So, hello then, welcome back to another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm reviewing Back to Black, the new Amy Winehouse musical biopic. But just before I do that, I should say that I've been swimming earlier today, and I've spoken about this plenty of times in previous podcasts on this channel. When I go swimming, I get this thing I like to call fuzzy thinking. So at any point in this podcast I don't really make sense, that's why. Because when you go swimming early in the day, it just affects the way you think throughout the rest of the day. So if at any point, as I've already said, that I don't make... So at any point, I didn't really make sense there. At any point, if I don't make sense in this podcast, that's why. Because I went swimming early today, and it's given me fuzzy thinking now. But I'm going to push through this podcast and do my review of Back to Black, as I watched the film yesterday at the cinema. So, let's get into it. Back to Black is the new Amy Winehouse musical biopic, as I've already said, which is directed by Sam Taylor Johnson. And Sam Taylor Johnson is best known for directing such films as Noah Boy, which was all about John Lennon's early life, and I really liked that film. I thought it was actually much better than I expected it to be. And she also directed 50 Shades of Grey, which it may surprise you to know, I haven't seen that film. It's not really my type of movie. And this is her latest film. And I was interested in seeing this movie, but I wouldn't say I was excited about it because, well, I wasn't excited about it for two main reasons. First of all, before I get into those reasons, I want to say that I like Amy Winehouse's music quite a lot. I mean, her songs like Back to Black, which obviously this film is named after, her version of Valerie is the best version, the version she did with Mark Ronson. Also, I like songs like, Rehab, Tears Dry on Their Own. There's another one I like quite a lot, but I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head right now. Anyway, you get the point I'm making. I like a lot of Amy Winehouse's songs quite a bit, although I wouldn't say I'm the biggest fan of her. But I was interested in seeing a musical biopic on her because, well, it's an artist I enjoy listening to. But as I've already mentioned, I wasn't terribly excited about seeing the musical biopic on her because, and reason number one, there are two big reasons I wasn't that excited about seeing a musical biopic on Amy Winehouse. And reason number one is this. I've already seen the documentary about her life, which came out in 2015. And that film, it's called Amy, and it was directed by Asif Kapadia. I think that's how I pronounce the director's name. That is a remarkable piece of cinema. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen because before watching that film, I really didn't know much about Amy Winehouse, apart from I've heard a couple of her songs. This was all the way back in 2017 or 2018 when I watched that film for the first time. I didn't really know much of her songs, and I remember watching that documentary for the first time and being completely taken by it. I was really surprised by how affecting I found that documentary and how much ground it covered as well. And I haven't seen that documentary in a long while. I'm probably going to go and rewatch it after watching this movie to see how much of this movie is actually accurate, because the documentary felt very accurate. I'm not sure how much it was, but it felt very accurate, and that documentary covered a lot of ground. So I didn't feel like I needed to see a musical biopic on her because I already knew her story from that documentary, and the documentary was so well made and was so affecting and so fascinating at the same time. So that was reason number one why I wasn't too interested in this musical biopic, why I wasn't too excited about this musical biopic on Amy Winehouse, because I feel like I've already seen her story done justice in that documentary which was released in 2015, titled Amy. And I'm pretty sure it's streaming on Channel 4, on the Channel 4 streaming service. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, so I think that is worth checking out. And I'm going to talk about this in more detail, but I actually think that's more worth checking out than this musical biopic. But reason number two that I wasn't too excited about watching this film was because I am beginning to experience musical biopic fatigue. I'm still going to go and watch a new musical biopic when it comes out to cinema, but when Bob Marley One Love came out the cinema, I wasn't that interested in seeing it. When did it come out? Like a month or 2 months ago now? I wasn't too interested in seeing it because I remember seeing the trailers for that film, and it didn't really like it was going to do anything new or different in terms of the storytelling for a musical biopic, and in the end it didn't. And the trailers for this film looked the same. They didn't really look like they're going to do anything new or inventive or different than I've already seen in previous musical biopics, you know. And I need musical biopics now, for me, to do something different, to have something that I haven't seen a previous musical biopic do, to make me actually really admire these films, because I am struggling to get excited for a musical biopic after I saw Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, which came out in 2022 now. That film was just perfect to me. That film ticked all the boxes that it needed to for a musical biopic, and that wasn't just a musical biopic. Elvis wasn't just a musical biopic. It was a Baz Luhrmann musical biopic. You know what I mean? That was a Baz Luhrmann film about Elvis. And if you've seen previous Baz Luhrmann films, if you've seen any Baz Luhrmann film, including Elvis, you know what I mean. It's just style and everything about it. It's just so Baz Luhrmann, and that's why I love that film so much. And this film didn't look like it was doing anything that I hadn't seen other musical biopics like Elvis, like Love and Mercy, which is the Brian Wilson Beach Boys biopic, like Bohemian Rhapsody, or like Rocket Man. It didn't, or even like Bob Marley One Love, which I didn't really like too much. It didn't look like it was going to do anything too new in the trailers, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to come out of this film feeling the same way as I did coming out of Bob Marley One Love, where I was like, that's made me realise I'm starting to experience musical biopic fatigue. You know, I remember coming out of Bob Marley One Love and having that feeling, and feeling like, if they're going to make a musical biopic in the next couple of months to years, it's got to do something different. And that was actually why I was a bit hesitant to see Back to Black, because, as I've already said, the trailers didn't sell me. They didn't make me think, that's something I haven't seen in a previous musical biopic. That all being said, I still wanted to see the film because I enjoy listening to Amy Winehouse's music, and I wanted to see this film's interpretation on her story. So I went to cinema to go and see this film yesterday, and here are my thoughts. This film, Back to Black, was fine. It's not terrible, and it wasn't even unwatchable or anything. It was actually an entertaining watch, and I didn't have a bad time watching this film. You can see what the filmmakers behind this movie were going for, and I don't think it's badly directed. I don't think the storytelling is bad either. You know, Sam Taylor Johnson is not a director I particularly admire, but what she does with her storytelling in this film is actually something I haven't really seen with other musical biopics. Like other musical biopics I've seen in the past, they try and tell the artist's story in the most grand way possible, but that wouldn't really work for an Amy Winehouse musical biopic if you know her story, because she's quite, from what I've seen of the Amy Winehouse documentary and from what I've seen of her in this film, she's a down-to-earth person. The film isn't showy. It isn't glitzy like Elvis was. And by the way, I loved Elvis. I'm not dissing that about Elvis. Perfect film in my opinion. But it isn't, you know, very showy like that film was. It isn't expensive looking. This feels like a small budget musical biopic. It felt like a small budget musical biopic for the most part, and I liked that about it, because Amy Winehouse was, from what I've heard, a very down-to-earth person. I do think the film does a good job of, you know, encapsulating that about her life. It does a good job at sustaining that tone of this down-to-earth girl who just had this, you know, unique and incredible voice. And I thought it was, I didn't think it was a badly made film, and I preferred it over Bob Marley One Love, and there were things that I really admired. Some things which I'm going to talk about in more detail later on in this review, you know, such as the lead performance from, what's her name? Marisa Abella. Apologies if I mispronounced her name, but I think that's how I pronounce her name. Marisa Abella give a very authentic and believable performance as Amy Winehouse. There's a lot of things I liked about this film, but I also felt that it could have been so much better, and the documentary is so much better. If you want to know about Amy Winehouse's story, watch the 2015 documentary instead, because it's far superior in my opinion. And it is far superior because this film felt too long. It felt like if it was 90 minutes, it could have been sharper, to the point, and had more of a spark about it, because this film doesn't really have a spark about it. And a musical biopic needs to have that spark. It needs to have that momentum where you keeps moving you forward and it keeps getting you more and more interested in this artist if you don't know much about the artist. Bohemian Rhapsody had that in spades. It had that in spades. So did Elvis. Elvis had that in spades, where it just kept getting better and better and got you more engaged about Elvis as that film went on. And I didn't know anything about Elvis before watching that film, and I absolutely adored it. Whilst here, I knew bits and pieces about Amy Winehouse because I'd seen a documentary on her a couple of years back. I hadn't seen it for a long while, so I couldn't remember loads of details about her life. But I had seen a documentary about her. And the thing is, the film focuses so much on Amy Winehouse's relationship with her ex-husband, Blake. And not to say that's not interesting, not to say it's not an important part of her life, because it definitely is. I remember watching the documentary and there was so much about their relationship in the documentary which was vital to her overall story. But this film focuses on it so much that it starts to make the other sections of the film more uneven. Like, the draw for me with a musical biopic is getting to see these artists make their music. Like, I don't love the film, but Love and Mercy, which is the Brian Wilson Beach Boys biopic, my favourite part of that movie is when you see Brian Wilson, who was literally the person behind some of the most famous Beach Boys songs, like Good Vibration. When you see him in the studio on Love and Mercy, you know, coming up with Good Vibrations, and it's fascinating. That's one of my favourite parts of any musical biopic that I've ever seen. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. It felt so real and so tangible at the same time. I don't know if tangible is the right word there, but you understand the point I'm making. Same with Bohemian Rhapsody, although Bohemian Rhapsody didn't do it quite as well. But Elvis did it so well, and just before he's about to perform at a concert, he's getting all these artists together, and he's seeing how they all sound, and he's rehearsing what they're going to play that night in Vegas. If you've seen the film, you probably know what scene I'm talking about in Elvis. It's one of the best sequences in the film, in my opinion. But in this film, you don't really get that. You don't really get to see Amy Winehouse crafting her music, and I felt that was a misstep. I mean, you get to see a bit of it, but in the grand scheme of things, I would probably say you get to see about 10% of her doing that overall out of the 90% of this movie. I don't think you get to see that much, and I think that was a misstep, because the parts where you do get to see her crafting her music is really interesting, but you don't get to see a lot of it. Like, early on in the film, there's this brilliant scene, and there are some brilliant scenes in this film. There are some brilliant things about it. There's a brilliant scene where you see Amy Winehouse writing a song, and the camera just stays on her and gradually zooms in as this 3-minute long scene, and the scene doesn't cut, at least as far as I can remember, it doesn't cut. It just gradually zooms in as she is writing this song, and it's one of the best moments of the film, and I want to see more moments like that. There's a moment where you see in the live lounge, and she's about to perform the live lounge version of Valerie, and a great moment, but it doesn't really last for that long. The film focuses more on her relationship with Blake, and I was like, okay, that's an important thing. I understand that. But I also want to see more about the music making. I want to see what went into her music making, what made her music so distinctive other than her voice. And her voice is just incredible. It's sensational. But at the same time, I wanted more about the craft of the music, and I wanted to see them recreating certain songs. Like, I wanted to see the creation. I wanted to see them recording back to back the actual song, and you get a little bit of that, but you don't really get to see much of it at the same time. You don't even get to see someone play Mark Ronson, and Mark Ronson, from what I know, from when I saw the documentary, played quite a big part in her professional life, and it's just things like that. Like, in the documentary, from what I remember, again, I haven't seen it in a long while, but from what I remember, Amy Winehouse's idol was Tony Bennett, and she got to record a song with Tony Bennett. But the film doesn't really cover that. When I remember, there's like one reference to it, and I'm thinking, oh, but that you had something there to really show how much she meant to so many people, not just her fans, but also other musical artists who admired her, and you didn't do that. And it didn't really focus on the relationship between her and her father too much either, which I felt was a misstep. I mean, don't get me wrong, her father, played by Eddie Marsan in the film, and if you know who if you saw a picture of Eddie Marsan, you know him. He's in so many movies, which I just can't think of off the top of my head right now, again because of fuzzy thinking, which I spoke about at the start of this podcast, what happens when you're swimming early today. But anyway, the film focuses on her relationship with her father a little bit, the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her father, but I felt it could have done a lot more of that. Again, instead it kept focusing on the relationship with Blake, and because of that, the film felt uneven in its focus. It felt unfocused to the point that I didn't really feel anything by the end of this film. I wanted to feel sad. I wanted to feel heartbreak. I wanted to be almost in tears by the end of this movie, but I wasn't. I sat there at the end and I was like, okay, it was fine. It was entertaining to watch, but I wasn't glued to my seat. I didn't feel like I couldn't get up out of my seat because of how much the film had got to me. I was just a bit like, oh, okay, that was a good film, but the documentary was far better. I remember watching the documentary and feeling like, oh god, that has really struck a note with me. No pun intended there. That has really touched a nerve. That has got to me, and now I want to go and listen to Amy Winehouse's music, but I didn't feel that after watching this film. And again, that's not to say it doesn't have perks. If you're somebody, I'm not sure if I've already said this, but if you're somebody who is interested in Amy Winehouse's story, you don't know her story, and you don't like watching documentaries, I do feel this film is informative, and you will learn some about her life. I think the film could have been better made, and I think it could have been more engaging and more compelling, and could have done that better, could have been more informative and actually told her story in a more exciting and engaging way. But at the same time, if you are interested in her story, this is a fine film to watch to learn about Amy Winehouse's story, to learn about what inspired her and the problems she faced when she got fame. You know, I think it is an informative film, although I also wouldn't say watch it at the cinema. I don't think this is a film you need to see at the cinema. You can watch this on streaming or on DVD. If you buy DVD still, you can watch this from the comfort of your own home, and I don't think it will alter your experience. Like, there's some movies, and I'm a big advocate for going to cinema. Personally, I think all movies should release at the cinema, and this film has, so, you know, there's that. I don't know the point I was trying to get to there, but still, I'm a big advocate. Got there in the end. I'm a big advocate for going to the cinema, but at the same time, there are certain films I go to cinema to watch, and it doesn't feel like I needed to go to cinema to see that movie, and this film felt like that. I felt like if I'd watched this at home, and streaming, on DVD, I may have preferred it, and I may have even got more out of it, because I did kind of feel like I'd wasted a bit of my time and money. Although I didn't really spend much money because I got an Odeon Limitless pass, but it did feel like I'd wasted a bit of energy to watch this film at the cinema, because I didn't need to. Although it is an informative film, and if you are interested in a story, I think this is not a bad retelling of it. I think you will get something out of it, although I do think the documentary is better. And if you were deciding whether to watch the documentary or the musical biopic about Amy Winehouse's life, watch the documentary instead, because it's far superior. Although, sticking with positives, as I've already said, Marisa Abela, that's the actress's name, she's terrific as Amy Winehouse. I totally bought her as Amy Winehouse. You know, she has this resemblance about her. From what I've heard, I don't know if this is actually the truth, but from what I've heard, she sings all of Amy Winehouse's songs in the film. And on paper, if you just said that to somebody, that sounds like it's not going to work, because Amy Winehouse just had such a distinct and unique voice. And although, you know, the actress's voice doesn't sound exactly the same. She's given it a go, and it does have her voice, her singing in this film, the actress's voice, Marisa Bella's voice as Amy Winehouse, does have some resemblance to Amy Winehouse's singing, and I like the fact that she actually sung Amy Winehouse's songs in this film. I thought that was a good addition, and I thought it worked for the most part. It sounded like Amy Winehouse enough for me to buy into that performance, and she looks like Amy Winehouse enough. I thought she was terrific in the film, and I thought she carried so much of this film as well, because the filmmaking isn't really anything special, and at times this film can feel tedious, it can feel a little dull, and I do think it is missing that spark, as a title of this podcast today. But at the same time, her performance carries so much of the film that it actually made it entertaining. I think the guy who played Blake as well, what's his name? I'm just going to get up here, not too prepared for this podcast clearly. Jack O'Connell. Jack O'Connell as Blake. I thought he was totally believable as well. I believed in their relationship. There's a great chemistry between those two actors, and I thought their performances made the Amy Winehouse and Blake relationship in this film more compelling than the writing. It made it more watchable, because again, I thought it was uneven in tone and in focus, but their performances did a good job at making that relationship at least somewhat engaging and somewhat compelling. Plus, Eddie Marsan is great as the father to Amy Winehouse. You can believe him as his overbearing father. Although, one thing I will say is, in the documentary, Amy Winehouse's father, from what I remember, is painted as somewhat of a villain. It's not painted as a particularly nice person. You don't totally get that in this film, and I would have liked to have gotten that a lot more. I would have liked to see him as this overbearing father to his daughter, trying to cash in on her fame. That's what the documentary painted his story as. Perhaps he's involved in the production of this film. I don't know. I generally don't know. But perhaps the father is actually, the real life father is actually involved in the production. So they didn't want to paint him in too much of a negative light. But it did feel like the documentary perhaps got under the skin of the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her father, and got to the truth of that relationship a bit more than this film did. I don't think the father was particularly well. I don't think the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her father was particularly well done in this film. Although Eddie Marsan is good as a father, I never felt like I was watching him in the film. Plus, I liked how the film focused on the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her grandmother, who is played by Leslie Manville, who just played Prince Margaret in the latest 2 seasons of The Crown. I think Leslie Manville did a great job, and I liked how the film, in its first act, focused on the relationship between Amy Winehouse and her grandmother, which, again, from what I remember from the documentary, was an important part of her life, and the effect that her grandmother's passing had on her, which isn't really a spoiler, because it's, if you didn't know already, it's not a big thing in the film, but still, Anyway, the effect that has on her is done well in the film. I like the focus on that. And again, there were things which are well done. There was moments in the film that I really enjoyed, and there were some brilliant moments. There were moments where I was like, oh, you're almost touching greatness. But it doesn't quite get there. And I think it's suffering from quite a few problems. I think it's uneven in its focus. I don't think it does a good job covering so many years of Amy Winehouse's life. Like, this isn't the first musical story that Sam Taylor Johnson has directed. The director of this film has also in the past, I think came out in 2008 or 2009, Sam Taylor Johnson also directed Noah Boy, about John Lennon's early life, and that film was far better in my opinion, because it's just about John Lennon's early life. It doesn't go into when he joins the Beatles. You see, you meet Paul McCartney and George Harrison in that film, but it doesn't go into when the Beatles become this mega huge band, and I think it's far better for that. Whilst this film does go into the bit where Amy Winehouse becomes this huge household name, and I think because of that, it suffers in trying to cover so much ground, and it leaves things out. Like, even so, the film focuses on the relationship between Amy and Blake so much, you only feel like you're getting half of that story. You don't feel like you're getting the complete story, because from what I remember, the documentary, and I know I'm comparing to the documentary quite a lot, but I'm going to continue comparing to this a lot. I can't speak anymore. I'm going to continue comparing to the documentary, because it's far better. The documentary, Amy Winehouse's life, focused on the relationship between her and Blake in a load more detail, and in more vivid detail at that. Like, you actually got to see pictures of how they were living, and it was difficult to watch. Whereas in this film, you don't really get that, and I just think it misses the beat on so many parts. I don't think it really hits the nerve it needed to make people really, I don't know what I'm trying to get to, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is I don't think it hit the marks that it needed to in order to truly work and to truly feel like it earned its place as a good, as a maybe even great musical biopic, because I don't think it does. There's not really anything that different about this film that I haven't really seen in other previous musical biopics, and it's a shame to say that, because the film had that potential, but it doesn't have that spark. If they really went into the musical side more, I feel this could have been a great film, but they didn't. And I understand that the personal life of Amy Winehouse is very important to her story. I understand that a lot. Seeing the documentary about her life, I get how important her relationship with Blake was to her overall story. But the musical part was also very important as well, and I feel this film doesn't go into that as much. Plus, I heard the filmmakers, and this is the last thing I'll say, I heard the filmmaker behind this movie said they wanted to make you feel that the true villains to Amy Winehouse's life were the paparazzi. And I hate the paparazzi. I hate the idea of paparazzi and all that sort of stuff. But the film didn't make me hate the paparazzi and what they did to Amy Winehouse more than I already did. The film didn't make me really, really hate them, and I felt it could have if it showed her rise to fame, if it showed how she was getting more and more interest in a more compelling and engaging fashion, in a way where, like, wow, you really get to see how the paparazzi ruining her life, whilst the film sort of gives the impression that it was actually Blake who ruined her life. When I look back at it, I mean, yes, you also get the bits of the film where you get bits of the film where you see how the paparazzi ruining her life, but it's not focused on as much as it could have been. The film is just fine. It's not terrible. And if you're interested in seeing Amy Winehouse's story told in the fashion of a musical biopic, watch this film. However, wait for it to come out and struggling to speak right now. Wait for it to come out on streaming, because I think you'll get a far better experience. And if you're going to wait for it to come out on streaming, watch the documentary instead, because it's better. It's just better, and the documentary made me feel like I didn't need a musical biopic on her life, and I still don't feel like I needed it. And I've seen a musical biopic though. The musical biopic doesn't feel earned. It feels like they made it because musical biopics are being made a lot nowadays. And again, it's going back into that whole thing of musical biopic fatigue. This film didn't make me feel musical biopic fatigue as much as Bob Marley One Love, but it did make me feel more like, God, the next musical biopic I see better be absolutely brilliant. Do something really different that I've seen previous musical biopics do. It better, the next one I see, truly needs to do something inventive, something imaginative, something creative that I haven't seen a previous musical biopic do, because this film doesn't really do that. I like the fact that it feels more lower budget. I like a lot of supporting performance in the film. I think they work very well. I think the lead performance is excellent. I totally bought into her as Amy Winehouse, and I understand all the praise she's getting. She carries so much of the film. thank God they chose this person, what's her name, Marisa Bella, to play Amy Winehouse. And I liked, my favourite moment of the film when you see Amy Winehouse coming up with her music. But I wish you got to see more of that, especially for a musical biopic, because I think it would have made it great and would have showed you the true genius of Amy Winehouse. Whilst you don't really get that from the musical biopic, but I felt like I got that from the documentary, though, you know. Again, it's not terrible, it's not unwatchable, it's not even that bad. I wouldn't call it a bad film, it's just a fine film. And I really wanted to call it a great film, though. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that Back to Black, I'm going to say it's a 5 out of 10. I give films a 5 out of 10, films I just find fine. You know, I put down in my notes that this one was actually a 6 out of 10. But the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the more I think it just has so many missed opportunities. You know, as I've said before, in the documentary, it covers, I know I'm comparing to the documentary like a broken record, but the documentary is so much better. I'm going to rewatch it now, because the more I talk about the documentary, the more I want to rewatch it to see how better it tells her story. In the documentary, it covers the fact that Amy Winehouse got to make a song with her idol, Tony Bennett. But this film doesn't cover that, and I felt that was such a missed opportunity. Such a missed opportunity. And when she wins her Brit Award, which I think is the award she won, shows you how memorable it was, because I didn't even remember it that much in the film. The scene where you see her win it, I felt it was just all... It had the ingredients, but it didn't quite... I don't think Sam Taylor Johnson quite knew how to put it all together. I don't think Sam Taylor Johnson is a brilliant director. I think she did a good job in Noah Boy, but yeah. Can you name another one of her good films? I don't think most people would even say Noah Boy, that's a thing now. So yeah, I don't think Sam Taylor Johnson was the right choice to direct this film, and I think that's what a lot of it comes down to. If you had someone who had more of a spark, who was able to bring more of a spark to the story, more of a momentum, more of a passion to the story, because that's what this film is missing. Got to it in the end. This film is missing the passion it needed to tell its story. That's what Elvis had. Elvis had passion in spades behind it. Bohemian Rhapsody had that as well. Love and Mercy had that for the most part, and some other musical biopics here and there have had that. Like Rocket Man has a passion behind it, but this film does not. I'm going to stop slapping the table there, because I'm actually annoying myself when I do that. But this film didn't have any passion behind it. That's the thing. The most passionate thing about it is the lead performance. That's it. Ugh. I just wish it was great, you know? Because I don't want to come out of an Amy Winehouse musical biopic and say it's just fine. I don't want to come out of any musical biopic and say it's just fine. Artists deserve to have their story told in the best way possible. And this film, I don't think, was the best way of telling Amy Winehouse's story. Again, it's just fine, as I keep saying, but I keep saying it's just fine because I wanted it to be so much better, you know? And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more in this podcast today, Back to Black is a 5 out of 10 from me. Anyway, guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Back to Black and you love it, that's great. Please let me know why I'm wrong in the comment section below. Or maybe you watched the film and thought it wasn't that good, similar to me. Whatever your thoughts are on Back to Black, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you were watching this on YouTube and you didn't know this already, you can also check out this podcast audibly on Spotify. Yes, you can check out this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you were listening to this podcast on Spotify, thank you very much to my Spotify listeners. You should also know that you can check out this podcast visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform, and wherever you watched or listened to this podcast. Thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts. Boy, this is a long outro. Look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As what he said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast. And I suppose this is it. Yeah, we got down the end, people. I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon. But bye for now. Bye.